They gave him a paralyzed bride as a cruel joke, but the cowboy raised her higher than anyone else ever had. Under the hazy yellow light of Murphy's saloon, blood dripped from Ezra Hawthorne's knuckles onto the warped wooden floor. Around him the air was thick with smoke, spilled whiskey, and rising tension. A heavy-set man with a busted lip was pushing himself up from the floor, growling low curses between blood-stained teeth. 3 more cowboys stood with hands twitching at their gun belts, ready to draw. "You yellow-bellied snake!" Pete Wilson spat, wiping blood from his split nose. "You ran from him Apache like a scared rabbit. Jimmy died 'cause you hid like a goddamn child." Ezra didn't respond. His fists were still clenched, his breath ragged. The insult struck deeper than the punch he'd just thrown. Around them, the saloon patrons, men he used to call friends, edged away from the fight, not out of fear, but disgust. Murphy, the saloon owner, stepped between them with a tired voice. "That's enough. Ezra, get out. You ain't welcome here no more." Ezra reached for his hat on the floor. No one stopped him. No one looked at him. The silence that followed his exit felt louder than any gunshot. Outside, the sun beat down hard on the dust-caked main street of Clearwater, Nebraska. It was the summer of 1867, but Ezra felt like the world had ended in May, the day of the Apache raid. He had been out checking fence lines with Jimmy when the riders came over the ridge. 15 warriors. Ezra had seen their war paint, heard their cries, and something in him shattered. While Jimmy stood and fired back, Ezra crawled behind a boulder and stayed there, paralyzed with fear. Jimmy died with 3 arrows in his chest. Since then, every handshake turned cold. Every familiar face looked away. Ezra's name had become a curse, whispered in shame. He rode home alone east of town to a rundown cabin that once felt like freedom, but now resembled a cell. His horse, Dusty, whinnied softly as he dismounted. Ezra ran a hand along her neck. "Let's go inside, girl." The cabin creaked with age and sorrow. He poured himself a cup of stale coffee and sat on the porch, staring at nothing. It was near sundown when he saw the riders, 3 of them, cutting across the prairie. Buck Morrison led the way on a sleek black stallion, with Jake Patterson and Tom Wheeler behind him, men Ezra had once ridden with, laughed with, trusted. "Evenin', Ezra," Buck called as they dismounted. His smile was too wide, his tone too smooth. Ezra didn't answer. "Mind if we water our horses?" Ezra gestured toward the trough. They tied their reins and let the animals drink. Buck stretched his arms like he owned the land. "Heard some talk in town about how you're all alone out here, no wife, no kin, not much of anything left." Jake smirked. "We figured you might be in need of company." Ezra's gut twisted. "What do you want?" Buck grinned. "To help. We heard about a girl, Isabel Crane, real sweet thing, pretty too, before the accident. Wagon rolled on her 2 winters back, broke her spine clean, can't walk no more." Ezra stared at them, frowning. "Her family's desperate," Tom added. "Girl's got no prospects. Uncle's offering $50 and a gold watch if someone'll marry her, take her off their hands." Buck tipped his hat back. "We thought of you." Buck's smile thinned. "'Cause it's perfect, ain't it? You ain't got nobody, and she ain't going nowhere. 2 broken folks, makin' do. They'll even pay you for the trouble." Jake chuckled. "Call it frontier charity." Ezra looked from one face to the next. The cruelty wasn't even hidden. "I don't want your damn jokes." "Ain't a joke, Ezra," Buck said, serious now. "We already told the Crane family you'd take her. Wagon's coming tomorrow." "You what?" "She ain't got a choice. And neither do you, far as we see. Nobody in town's gonna have you. You're done there. This way you get money and maybe some peace." They mounted their horses, smug satisfaction dripping from their eyes. "You should thank us," Buck said before turning. "Most folks wouldn't even bother." They rode off, hooves stirring the dust that lingered long after they were gone. Ezra sat frozen, staring into the blood-orange sunset. His fists were shaking again, but not from shame this time. From something else. Something that felt dangerously close to fury. The wagon arrived at dawn, its wheels creaking under the weight of uncertainty. Ezra stood on his porch with arms crossed, the early light stretching long shadows across the ground. Dust clung to the hem of his coat as he watched the driver, a lean, gray-bearded man, pull the mules to a stop. "You Ezra Hawthorne?" the man asked without dismounting. Ezra nodded. "Name's Henry Crane, Isabel's uncle." He gestured to the back of the wagon with a jerk of his thumb. "Got your bride here, along with her things." Ezra's stomach turned. The word bride sounded too final, too false. "I'd like to meet her first." Henry climbed down, muttering about how people didn't appreciate favors anymore. He pulled back the canvas tarp. Inside, lying on a thin mattress, was Isabel Crane. Her hair was the color of burning leaves in autumn, wild around a face pale as fresh cream. Her green eyes met his, sharp, wary, distant. A quiet kind of courage shimmered behind them, like she'd stopped expecting kindness and learned to live without it. "You must be Ezra," she said, her voice soft but clear. "Yes, ma'am." She didn't smile. "They told you I can't walk?" "They did." "And you still agreed to this?" Ezra hesitated, then said, "I reckon I did." She turned her face away. "Then let's get on with it." It took effort and awkward silence to carry her into the cabin. Henry helped, grumbling the whole time. Her wheelchair followed, a fine piece of craftsmanship, clearly bought with care. Ezra noticed Isabel didn't thank her uncle. When Henry finally left, the silence he left behind was almost a relief. The cabin felt smaller with her inside. Ezra had built it for one man with quiet habits. Now, every corner became an obstacle, every doorframe too narrow. She tried to move herself with the wheels, but the floorboards snagged. He reached to help. "I can do it," she said sharply. "All right," he said, stepping back. She wheeled herself to the table and stared out the window. The next morning, she tried to make coffee and spilled half the tin across the counter. By noon, she burned her hand trying to lift a kettle that was too high for her reach. Ezra, mending fence wire at the table, looked up when he heard the clatter. "This ain't working," she muttered, tears at the edge of her voice. "None of it works." Ezra stood, walked outside, and didn't say a word. He returned an hour later with a saw, a hammer, and a pile of lumber. "What are you doing?" she asked. He didn't answer, just started cutting. By sunset, he had lowered the counter and built a ramp from the porch to the yard. 2 days later, he widened the bathroom door. He adjusted the sink, rearranged the chairs, even carved notches into the window handles so she could pull them open. When she wheeled over the new threshold on the third day, she stopped beside him while he hammered a brace onto the stair rail. "Why are you doing this?" He didn't look up. "So you can move around better." "You don't owe me this." "I know." She paused. "Then why?" He finally met her eyes. "Because this ain't just my house anymore." Something shifted then, not loud or sudden, but real. Not forgiveness, not affection, just the faintest trace of understanding. She wheeled away without saying another word. But that night, as he passed by her room, he saw her sitting by the window with her sewing in her lap, candlelight flickering across her face. And for the first time since the Apache raid, Ezra didn't feel alone. The storm rolled in without warning. A sudden hush swallowed the prairie before thunder cracked like a rifle shot. Inside the cabin, lanterns flickered as Ezra Hawthorne sat at the rough-hewn table, his fingers tracing the thin blue lines of a ledger Isabel had pulled from her bag. He studied her as she explained, voice soft under the wind's drum. She told him about Omaha, her father's general store, how at 20 she'd balanced accounts, ordered stock, handled suppliers, how she'd been proud, independent, all until the accident that broke her back and shattered her future. When her cousins sold everything, claimed she could not carry responsibility, it wasn't just a store she'd lost. It was her dignity. Ezra glanced at the ledger, columns neat and confident, her handwriting sure. He had never looked at her that way before, not just as someone broken, but as someone formidable. Outside, rain lashed against the window panes, wind rattled loose boards, and the world narrowed to the flicker of lantern light and the sound of wipers fighting the downpour. Isabel tucked the ledger away, her face exhausted but calmer. Ezra stirred the stew on the fire, each ripple of water reflecting his conflicted thoughts. He thought of the ranchers who called him coward, of the family he lost, of the shame that hung like wet cloaks over both of them. Then a sharp knock rattled the front door, 3 sharp, deliberate bangs that broke the hush. Ezra's hand froze on the spoon. Isabel straightened, eyes still steady. They both heard it, the low growl of voices beyond the door. Ezra stood, moving to the window, peering out through dripping glass. Figures blurred in the rain, at least 3, maybe more. Men with heavy boots and heavier intentions. He stepped back and reached under the table where his rifle lay hidden beneath a cloth. Isabel watched, silent, understanding dawning in her gaze. This was no rescue party. This was something else. He gripped the rifle, heart pounding. He spoke, soft but firm. "Isabel, get behind me." She didn't flinch. She rolled forward, reaching down to under her bed. She pulled out a scoped Colt .45, her father's, and tucked it into her lap. "I'm not hiding." The door burst inward with a splintering crash. A tall man in a soaked leather coat strode in, pistol drawn. Behind him, 2 others seeped through the rain. The storm outside roared, masking the sound of shuffling boots. "Easwell Hawthorne," the man barked, voice rough. "Heard you turned into a soft farm boy hiding behind a crippled wife." Isabel's hand tightened on the Colt. Ezra stepped forward. "Stay out," he said. He man sneered. He aimed at Isabel. Ezra's pulse thundered in his ears. "Ezra," Isabel whispered, a shadow of fear and steel. She and Ezra locked eyes. Ezra moved like something rebuilt, something ready. He fired first, 2 shots, carving a line of warning into the floor. The intruders staggered, bracing themselves. As the leader lunged for Ezra, Isabel fired. 1 shot. The intruder jerked and stumbled, clutching his side. His eyes widened in surprise, then agony. The other 2 men hesitated. "Get out!" Ezra roared. His voice carried the weight of every cowardice he had shed. He fired again, low and loud, goose-stepping across the cabin. Isabel slid out of her chair, leaned forward, firing twice more at the second intruder rushing toward Ezra. Both shots found their mark. The second man dropped to his knees. The third turned and bolted outside into the storm, leaving the wounded to collapse inside. Rain washed in through the broken door. Ezra lowered his rifle, breathing heavy. Isabel sank back, pale but triumphant. For a moment they simply stared at each other, the storm raging around them like a judge. Then Ezra exhaled, relief and pride mingling. "We did it." She nodded, pressing the Colt to her side, her gaze not leaving him. Together. The fire popped behind them. The intruders groaned on the floor. Ezra edged forward and dropped the rifle, then knelt beside Isabel. He reached out and touched her hand, the one holding the Colt. It trembled but did not release. His eyes glimmered with something new, respect, gratitude, something deeper. They rose. Ezra walked to the door and closed it against the storm. Then he turned and reached for Isabel's chair, guiding her beside the fire. Her face was pale, shock lingering in the corners of her eyes. He draped a blanket over her shoulders. "This changes things," he said softly. She met his gaze in the lantern glow. "I can protect us, too." He squeezed her hand. "No one's running this time." Outside, the firestorm raged. Inside, their home held firm. Outside, the storm battered the cabin, but within its walls, something else roared to life, something neither cowardice nor weakness could extinguish. The 2 of them stood taller now, shoulder to shoulder, ready to face the world that thought them nothing. The morning after the storm, the prairie was washed clean, but the air stayed heavy with gossip. Rumors had taken root back in Clearwater, whispers that Ezra and Isabel were nothing but 2 broken people clinging to each other because nobody else would want them. Ezra rode into town to check for mail and found a letter waiting. His lips went dry when he saw the seal and return address. Omaha, from Isabel's cousin James. Inside was an offer. Isabel could return home, sell Ezra's claim on her, receive enough money to buy back her father's store with Ezra paid off in full. She'd be safe, prosperous, reset. But it meant leaving Ezra behind. Back at the cabin, Isabel sat on the porch in the early sun, the letter open in her lap. Ezra dismounted beside her, dusty and tired from the ride. He didn't say anything, but she met his eyes, and he nodded toward the letter. She handed it to him. His gut twisted, reading the words. She had tuned the world out. Ezra's ranch, his cabin, Mustang roaming past the porch. But now the world was calling again. "Ezra," she said quietly, "do you think we have to do this? Because neither of us has a choice? Because I'm broken and you're disgraced?" Ezra rubbed his jaw. After everything, Murphy's saloon, the Apache raid, the storm, the intruders, he wondered himself, did he see her because of pity? Convenience? Isabel slid forward. "If I could walk again, if I had a store and family, would you still want me? If your name wasn't stained?" He shut his eyes, struggling. The horses whinnied in the distance. The wind stirred the prairie grass, waiting for his answer. "I don't know," he admitted, voice low. "I don't know what had happened in some other life." Isabel's gaze sharpened. "Then why are you here now?" Ezra inhaled, heart pounding. He took her hand. "Because in this life, I don't want to lose you. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever." Silence settled, thick and undeniable. She stared at his hand, then into his eyes. She saw what hadn't been there before. Earnest, vulnerable, changed. She swallowed. "Ezra, I've been thinking about who we are to each other. I need to know that you're not just keeping me around to feel better about yourself." He said nothing. "You can say it," she urged, voice trembling. "If you don't want, if it's easier to take the money, I'll understand. I'll go back." Ezra held her gaze. Then he smiled, slow and real. "Isabel, I don't have much left in this world. Maybe nothing. But what I have now is you, and a future I believe in. You're not my charity or my last option. You're the reason I want to stand for something." Her eyes glistened. Tears spilled. She nodded, the letter slipping from her fingers onto the porch boards. Ezra leaned close. "I can't promise I wouldn't run from danger," he said softly, "but I swear I won't run from you." She placed her hand over his heart. "That's all I needed to hear." They sat there together as the sun warmed the cabin. No grand gesture, no ceremony, just two people finding each other in a world that had tried to write them off. In that moment, they were more than the scars they carried. They were proof that broken parts could be rebuilt stronger when held with purpose. Under a sky thick with stars and silence, Ezra led Dusty, his mare, to the edge of the barn. The grass shimmered silver in the moonlight, and the world felt as still as breath before a prayer. Isabel sat bundled in a blanket by the open barn doors, her eyes tracking Ezra's every move. She did not yet know what he had built, only that he had been working in secret, hammering late into the night, hiding bundles of rope and iron from her questions with a sly smile and a gentle, "You'll see." He approached her slowly, knelt down beside her chair, and offered his hand. "Come with me," he said. She blinked. "Ezra, it's the middle of the night." He didn't answer, only smiled and wheeled her to the barn. Inside, hanging from the rafters, was something that looked like a tangle of leather straps and rope at first. But Isabel's sharp eyes caught the shape of it. A rig, a lift, a way up. Her breath caught in her throat. "What is this?" Ezra adjusted the harness gently. "Something I built for you, so you can ride." She stared at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ride? You mean on a horse?" He nodded. No one should have to live life only looking up at the world. Tears sprang to her eyes, but she blinked them back. "Ezra, since before the accident, I haven't been that high. I haven't—" He touched her hand. "Then tonight, we change that." Slowly, with careful strength, he helped her into the harness, securing each strap with steady fingers. When she trembled, he steadied her. When she gasped as the rig lifted her from the chair, he whispered, "I've got you. I always will." Dusty stood patient and calm, her breath forming soft clouds in the cool night. Ezra guided the rig forward, lowering Isabel gently onto the saddle. Her body tensed at first, but then, as she settled into the rhythm of the horse beneath her, her eyes widened. The world was different from here. She looked out across the plains. The moon painted the hills in silver, and the wind danced through the tall grass like a river of whispers. From the back of the horse, the horizon stretched endlessly, and for the first time in 2 years, she felt like she was part of it again, not watching life from the edge, but inside it. She let out a shaky breath, half a sob. Ezra mounted behind her and steadied her waist, wrapping a blanket around both of them. "You're crying," he said softly. She nodded. "It's the first time since the accident. I feel like myself again." Ezra leaned close, his voice just above a whisper, warm against her ear. "The world took your legs, Isabel, but it ain't taken the sky." She laughed then, a sound full of awe and sorrow and gratitude, and it broke something open inside him. They rode slowly across the field, the stars above them, the earth below, and for a little while the weight of the past slipped away. No one had ever lifted her so high. No one had ever thought to. And in that quiet, starlit moment, love settled between them, not like thunder, but like dawn. The sun was barely up when the first rock shattered their front window. Ezra was halfway through restocking flour sacks when the crash froze his hands. Isabel, from behind the counter, did not flinch. She looked up calmly, her hand already inching toward the drawer where they kept a pistol. It was not the first time trouble came their way, and both of them knew who it would be before the dust even settled outside. Buck Morrison. But this time he was not alone. 6 men on horseback, some from Clearwater, some strangers with hard eyes and twitching fingers. They rode with the air of men who knew the law was too far to matter and the neighbors too scared to care. Ezra stepped outside first, rifle slung low, heart. "Morning, Buck," he said. Buck dismounted, spitting into the dirt. "Morning, Ezra. Shame about your window. Guess things break when you play house with someone too broken to stand." Ezra's jaw clenched. Behind him, Isabel rolled out, her pistol resting in her lap like it belonged there. Buck noticed. "Well, look at that. The little lady thinks she's a guard dog now." Arizo didn't blink. "You came here with guns and cowardice. Buck, tell me, which one are you planning to use first?" Laughter rippled through the group, uneasy and thin. Ezra felt it in his gut, the way the wind stiffened, the way Dusty shuffled in the back. Trouble was here for real this time. "We're just here to collect," one of the strangers said. "Territory tax, for operating a store on what used to be public drive." Ezra shook his head. "This land's mine. Bought it fair. And we filed all the proper paperwork with Sheriff Coleman." "Sheriff's too busy chasing real problems," Buck sneered. "Besides, ain't no sheriff out here now, is there?" One of the riders stepped forward, hand resting casually on his holster. Ezra didn't move. Neither did Isabel. "We're not paying," Ezra said. "Then we'll take what we want." The moment shattered like the glass window behind them. Buck's hand moved first, but Isabel was faster. Her pistol barked once, a clean shot into the dirt between Buck's boots. He jumped back with a curse, stunned to see smoke curling from the barrel in her hands. "I miss by choice," she said. "Try me again." Ezra's rifle came up next, trained on the man with the twitching fingers. "Nobody's taken a damn thing from us." It wasn't a cinematic standoff. No fast draws or flying bodies. Just dust, wind, and the heavy breath of people who'd come too far to back down now. The stranger fired first. Ezra ducked, firing from his knee, grazing the man's arm. Isabel rolled to the porch post and braced her wrist. 2 shots cracked from her gun, one striking the side of the wagon, the other knocking a rifle from a rider's grip. Someone charged the door. Ezra tackled him before he crossed the threshold, both of them hitting the dirt in a thud of fists and breath. Isabel couldn't help there, but she held the line, covered the store, fired once more when another tried to flank them. A bullet screamed past her cheek. She felt it tear skin, hot and burning. Ezra saw her cry out, and rage filled his chest like thunder. He shouted, swung the butt of his rifle into a man's gut, and fired into the air. Enough! Silence followed, sudden and jarring. The men stood, panting, bloodied, unsure. "You wanted a fight?" Ezra yelled. "You got one, but you don't get to call us weak anymore." Buck looked at Isabel, at her bleeding cheek, at the way she still held her pistol, hand steady. "You're both insane," he muttered, backing away. "No," Isabel said, "we're just done being prey." They left, one by one, retreating into the dust, the lawless air cracking around them like broken thunder. Ezra rushed to Isabel's side, touching her face gently. "You're hurt." "Just a scratch," she whispered, leaning into his hand. But her eyes were full, not of pain, but of something deeper, fierce, unbroken. They sat on the porch as the sun climbed higher, side by side, weapons resting in their laps, backs straight. And behind them the store still stood, shaken, bruised, but still standing. Like some. The morning was golden, the kind of quiet, windswept hush only the prairie could offer. Ezra stood beneath the awning of their store, running a hand along the smooth wood of the new sign they'd built together. It wasn't painted yet, not fully carved, but the space where the letters would go gleamed with promise. Behind him, Isabel was sorting ledger books at the counter. She always hummed when she was working, low, tuneless notes that had become the rhythm of his mornings. Ezra turned to look at her, really look. Her hair was braided today, a strand tucked behind one ear as she scribbled. The sun lit the freckles on her cheek. And just like that, the question formed in his chest. Not from duty, not from pity, but from that wild, tender certainty that she had become the heart of everything good left in his world. He wiped his hands on his jeans, walked inside, and stood beside her without a word. She noticed, as she always did. "You're quiet," she said. He took a breath. "Belle," he said, using the name only he dared. "I've been thinking." She looked up, eyes curious, soft. "About what?" "About how this started." He leaned against the counter. "You came here in a wagon like some unwanted parcel folks were glad to be rid of. And me, I was so low. I thought maybe I deserved a life where love was just a transaction." Her lips pressed together, not with sadness, but with understanding. "I reckon that first month I was scared to hope," he continued. "Scared to think a man like me could still build something true." "And now?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Ezra reached into his back pocket. Not a ring box, he didn't have one, just a simple leather pouch, the same kind her uncle had handed him that fateful morning. But this time it carried a silver ring nestled in cloth, handcrafted by a silversmith down in Broken Hills. On its band was etched a hawk in flight, and beside it, a wildflower in bloom. "I know what this started as, but I also know what it became. Isabel Crane," he said, dropping to one knee, not dramatically, just simply, reverently. "Will you marry me? Not because we have to, not because we're both broken, but because you make me want to stop running. Because when I see you, I see home." She stared at him, stunned into silence. Then tears welled in her eyes. "You fool," she whispered. "You beautiful, wonderful fool." And she nodded. They married 2 weeks later under the open sky. No church, no choir. Just the wind, the grass, the sun, and the people of Clearwater, who had begun to see them differently. Not as outcasts, but as builders of something real. Isabel didn't wear white. She wore a deep blue, woven dress, trimmed with soft earth tones and delicate embroidery. Her mother had made it years ago, before the accident, before the betrayal. It had been folded in her trunk all this time, waiting. Her chair was wrapped in wildflowers and cowboy rope, Ezra's idea. Daisies, Indian paintbrush, sage. It looked like something plucked from a frontier fairy tale. Ezra wore his cleanest shirt, a vest mended at the shoulders, and boots polished until they caught the morning light. His hair was combed back, but strands still blew in the breeze. Reverend Tully, a retired circuit preacher who had once baptized cattle for lack of people, agreed to officiate. He stood with his hat pressed to his chest, and tears in his eyes as he spoke. "These two souls," he said, "found each other not through ease, but through fire, and it is through fire that gold is made strong." Ezra looked at Isabel, who sat beneath the arbor they had built from wagon wheels and fence posts. Her eyes locked with his, shining with everything words could never say. "I don't know what I'll be in 20 years, he said when it was time for vows, "but I know who I'll be with, and I know that I will never again hide from who I am, because you made me believe I was worth standing for." She smiled, and her hands trembled as she lifted her own vow from her lap. "I was discarded," she said, voice steady, "not just by my legs, but by people who forgot who I was. You remembered, you reminded, you rebuilt not just this place, but me, and I promise to stand beside you, even if I can't stand at all." No one spoke, not a breath stirred among the dozen or so gathered. Then Reverend Tully said the words, "You may kiss the bride." Ezra knelt and kissed her, not quick, not showy, but with the calm intensity of a man who had found the only treasure he ever needed. Later that afternoon, after the guests had gone and the sun began to dip, they finished the sign together. Ezra hammered in the final nail. Isabel, seated beside him, used a small brush to darken the etched letters. Isabel, Ezra, goods for the free, by the free. The wind caught her skirt, lifting it gently. Ezra stood behind her, hands on her shoulders, his forehead resting against the crown of her head. Then he stepped forward and began to push her wheelchair gently onto the newly swept porch, out toward the open yard. The sun caught his face. She laughed, turning back to look at him. "What are you doing?" "Giving you a view," he said. She laughed again, brighter now. "The same one I had from the saddle?" "No," he said, leaning down, "even higher." And they rolled into the gold light together, two souls who had started as a cruel joke, now standing tall, in a land that tried to bury them. They had rewritten what it meant to be whole. And together, they had made freedom a brand no man could take away. If this story stirred something in your soul, if you felt the wind on the prairie, the weight of love born from ashes, and the power of two broken hearts building something unbreakable, then you're in the right place. Here at Wild West Love Stories, we tell more than tales. We share truths that echo through time, that love can rise from the dust, that strength isn't always loud, and that even the forgotten can become legends. So if you believe in love that fights back, in courage that doesn't need noise, and in stories that leave a mark, subscribe now to Wild West Love Stories, where every week we bring you new stories of heart, grit, and redemption from the untamed edges of America. Because out here the bullets may miss, but the heart never does.